all to tonight's webinar. As you can see here, the topic is the pillars of performance and goal setting. Tony mentioned my role, my title there, second level schools and player welfare officer. Another area that I'm involved in is the whole area around performance and lifestyle. And I suppose that's kind of the topic that we're going to cover tonight. Pillars of performance, what does it mean? Really, it's probably another term for self-profiling. So I would imagine most of the participants on the call tonight are coaches. So it'll be angled towards coaches as to how, I suppose, you can sit down with the players that you're working with and actually help them profile themselves where they're at. The other thing as well, if there's parents on, if there's players on that are interested in the topic as well, the same thing applies. You can do it yourself in your own time if you wish. So as I say, we're hoping that it will meet everybody's needs on the call tonight. The two topics lead into each other. So the idea behind this is that players sit down with their coaches or themselves and they actually start to identify their strengths and weaknesses as a Gaelic footballer or a hurler. Based on that, then what they'll do is they'll set some goals as to how they can improve, I suppose, their game. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. There's two recommended ways. There's one probably I like a bit better than the other, but I'll chat more about that or go into more detail about that just as we cover it. Just before we move on, as I say, just about the questions. Listen, I'm happy to take questions at any stage, but I need them to be relevant to what we're talking about at the time. If there's any generic questions or whatever, maybe we could leave those to the end and try to answer them then. But by all means, if you have a question on anything that I'm talking about and you want a bit of clarity or you want further depth, by all means, just put up your hand there. And I think Tony's in the background there. He'll be able to unmute you and let you ask your question. Okay, so hopefully at the end of this session, you'll be able to understand how to assist players profile their strengths and weaknesses. And then based on that, you'll be able to identify areas that need extra attention. Hopefully you'll understand the importance of goal setting, and then you'll understand how to set goals to improve performance or how to assist your players in setting goals to improve their performance. Okay, so again, tonight maybe is a bit different. I'd imagine a lot of people on the call are coaches who are out on the pitch, coaching the technical side of things, coaching the skills or, developing the fitness or coaching tactics. Tonight it's slightly different. It's probably a lot of it will be done away from the field, but when it's done, it can be very, very beneficial to players once they get back onto the field again. A bit of background, the pillars of performance, and I suppose just to put into perspective, quite often I think teams, players get judged basically just on the success, whether they've won the championship or won the league or not. And quite often I suppose that's unfair, because there could be 16 teams in a championship or a league, maybe more than that. Only one can win, and it probably doesn't mean that everybody else has come up short or everybody else is a failure or had a bad year. So the message that I'm trying to send is that every player desires success. For some, that means winning medals. However, success involves more than just winning. It's about maximizing your potential and performing as close to your potential in each and every match. Okay, so that's maybe it's a different way of looking at it. A lot of people have the winning thing in their head, but I suppose Jim Gavin became very famous for talking about that term he used, the process. And I think that's what the Dubs in there, when they're going really well there, that's what they were good at. They kept performing to their potential every day they came out. So that's just a quick message around, I suppose, how you judge success. Basically, to any player that I work with, or I deliver a lot of these around the schools in Ulster and some the FE colleges as well, I always try to make the point to the players that your job as a developing player is to consistently improve. Quite often players don't look at it that way. They often think there's a lot coming at me. There's tactics, there's S&C, there's all these things coming at me, and I just want to win whatever competition I'm playing in. But when you strip it back, for a developing player, they need to be better in 12 months' time than what they are now. Okay? Quite often you think it would happen you think it would happen naturally, but it doesn't always happen like that. Quite often players can regress a bit in 12 months rather than improve. So that leads us into actually why profiling is important. To improve, it's essential that you profile or you identify your strengths and weaknesses and identify the areas that need extra attention. Okay, how do you do it? It's this term, the pillars of performance. For a player to perform, and I don't care, it's Gaelic football, hurling, whatever, ladies football, camogie, whatever it is, my opinion is that there's 5 areas that contribute. Okay, obviously the first one is the physical side of things. You know, players need to be strong. They need to have good endurance. They need to get up and down the pitch. They need to be fast. They need to have agility. So they need all those things. That's one of the sections that's important. The second pillar, as we talk about, is the technical side of things. That's your skills. You know, can the players take the ball first time? Are they able to, you know, tackle without giving away a foul? Are they able to you know, kick past the ball over a distance? All those things. Tactical has become so relevant over this past, I suppose, 10 years. I think maybe as a sport, we were kind of very, very behind tactically. Going back about 10 years ago, there was very, very few tactics. But now you see the introduction of the quick restarts, the kickouts, the defensive shapes, there's attacking shapes. There's so many tactics involved in the game now, even down the levels or down the age groups. So that's a vital part of the game. The mental side comes in. It's the fourth pillar that we use. Again, examples of the mental side would be, you know, a player's preparation for a match. You know, do they have a routine that they follow? Their confidence, their concentration during a game, their resilience. You know, say for example they miss a penalty and early on in the game, does that impact their performance for the rest of the game? The referee gives a really bad call against them. You know, can they get past that very quickly, or does that hamper their game for a while as well? And the last one that make up the 5 pillars of performance is lifestyle. So in this pillar, we're talking about things like you know, the off the field stuff. You know, how you getting on at school or how you getting on at work. Your nutrition, your hydration, sleep is a massive factor as well. And you know, quite often maybe this is the one that people don't really put much emphasis into. But I'm sure a lot of people listening on the call can all think of a player who had the first 4 nailed. They were physically very good, technically, tactically, mental. They seemed to have it all, but the lifestyle one was the one that let them down. So that's the idea behind this, is that for any player, for them to perform, they need to be strong in each of the 5 areas. If if there's 4 areas, 3 areas good, you know, it won't work. That they have to be strong in each of the 5 areas, or else the whole thing will crumble down. Okay. So what I'm going to lead into now, or what I'm going to show you is how you can actually use these 5 pillars to sit down with a player, or indeed, as I said, as a player themselves, to actually score themselves where they feel they are at the minute in their game. Okay, so really the exercise, and you can, I'll talk a wee bit later about where you can find these templates. They are available on the Ulster GAA website. Basically, how it works, as you can see, there's 5 different sections down the left-hand side. So what you would challenge your players to do, and again, you can do it individually or you can do it collectively as a group if you get time, is actually get them to sit down and assess what's important to them in their game. So the first section is physical. Now, a goalkeeper, their physical needs is going to be very different from a midfielder or a wing half forward, or indeed a cornerback. You know, so it's very, very much specific to the player and the position that they play. So what you would do is you would ask them to come up with the most important 3 things in that particular pillar. So it's quite small here. I'll read it out. Hopefully you can see it. This player in the example, physically, they have identified that their ability to perform repeated sprints was important to them, and they scored themselves a 6 out of 10. The second thing that they identified as being important was their upper body strength. Needs a bit of work. They've identified that they're a 4 out of 10 on that. And the third thing is their speed off the mark. They identified that they were an 8 out of 10 on that. Somebody asked me, and it's a good question, what is 10? What does 10 look like? 10 for me would be the top, the elite players, you know, in in Ireland, the county players at the minute. So again, it's important that players are developing players are being honest about where they're at. Sometimes you'll find players are a wee bit exaggerate their skills. Sometimes they will maybe be hard on themselves. So I think it's important that you get a really relevant score here when you're doing it. And maybe if you don't agree with it as a coach, actually challenge it with the player. Technically, just to run through this pretty quickly as well, they've identified their shooting accuracy as a 5, needs a bit of work. Their tackling technique is a 4, and their catching a high ball is an 8. Moving on to the tactical side of things. Do they really understand their role? They've scored themselves a 6. Their positioning, they've scored themselves a 6. And reading the game, they've scored themselves a 7. So not too bad. Now, probably coming into problem areas for this particular player, the mental side of things. This player has identified that their pre-game routine is very, very poor. It's a 3. Now, I know that sounds kind of very highfalutin, pre-game routine, but I think it's important for players to have a kind of a basic, I suppose, guideline that they follow, that they know that gets the best out of themselves. So you'll get players eating certain foods at certain times, making sure they're hydrated. Some players like to think about the match a lot. Some players like to just put the match out of their head and relax. So everybody's different, and I think it's important at a youth level that players start to think about, what their arousal level is. Do they need to be? Are they the people that need to be really, really on edge to get the best out of themselves in the game, or are they the people that need to be really, really relaxed? And again, as I say, everybody's different. Moving on, the ability to cope with mistakes. The player has scored themselves 4 out of 10. And their discipline is quite low there. It's 4 out of 10 as well. And finally, the lifestyle. They've identified their time management. Again, quite often the players that we work with, they can be really, really busy. And I think we forget sometimes as adults how busy maybe youth players can be. They're maybe studying for A levels and got part-time jobs, and maybe dual players playing different sports. They don't have a lot of time, so it can be an important factor for a lot of developing players. Their high standard of schoolwork and their quality sleep, they've scored themselves a 6 and a 5 in that as well. You can see to the right-hand side, the column is their target score in 12 months. So really the idea behind this is that you revisit it. So hopefully the teams that you're working with, you maybe get more than 1 year with them. And it's going back to what I said earlier, a player's job, and particularly a youth player or any player, is to be better in 12 months' time than what they are now. And that's I don't think that can be argued with, unless an injury or something external happens. But I think it's their responsibility, or they have to be made accountable for that. In 12 months' time, when you sit down to do this exercise again, you've got to be scoring better. You've got to be better. All right. Now, what I would say, this particular player has given themselves a target score for 12 months. Some of the stuff there is really, I suppose, maybe it's not achievable. It might be unrealistic. I would think that if a player is improving in 3 areas, maybe even just by 1-2 marks in 3 of those areas, that would be enough. That shows improvement. I think we're starting to get into problems whenever a player tries to make too many changes or tries to improve on too many things at once, and all of a sudden it kind of just gets out of reach a wee bit, or it gets a wee bit too much. I think it's very, very important. But once you identify these 15, I think it's 15 things, it's very, very important that you sit down as a coach with a player and identify your top 3 and set a realistic target for 12 months' time. Okay.
Ryan, can I come in there a wee second?
Yes.
A couple of questions here relevant to the slide there, Ryan. So we'll bring them up now just quickly. Matthew has asked the question: what age group would you begin to profile a player?
Yeah, it's up to yourself. I suppose it's something that I just seen done at the academy squad level. That starts under 14, under 15. It's really up to yourself. I would leave it to their, I would say probably under 15 that you would start with a group at that age. But the thing about it is, I've seen profiling done, and it's been really, really detailed, really high-end detailed stuff And I think it's very, very important that you keep it as simple as you can. I think the saying that the most difficult thing is keeping it simple. And I think the simpler that you keep it, the better. Even a 15-year-old will get this, and they'll be able to understand what it is you're trying to do as a coach.
That's great. Patrick will answer your question to finish up, Patrick. And then there's one here from Ollie. There's 3 options per pillar in this example. Was the player given a list of options per pillar and asked to pick 3 that were most relevant to him or her?
Yes, that's a good question. I quickly learned when I did this with players, they struggle a bit. They struggle a bit with finding what it is that they're being asked to do, or struggle a bit with finding examples. So my next slide here is some examples that when I do this task, I put up on the data projector. Now, they don't have to pick what's here. They don't have to. They can make up their own mind, but it's just up there to prompt them or to give them an idea of some of the answers that they could possibly use. Now, excuse me, these things we haven't actually, we just didn't pull them out of the air. We did a bit of work with, I think it was 22 of the best under 16 footballers in Ulster back about 5 or 6 years ago. And these are the things that kept jumping out. So there's a lot in it. I don't have to go through them there. But again, this is all available to you on the Ulster Council website. And so I'll have a chat about that at the end as to where you can access that. But yes, that is a really good question. I would have these example answers up in the background whenever you're asking the players to go through the task.
And just one last, sorry, Ryan, for just one last thing here. The men thanking you for the feedback is great. They said, Paul has asked the question, what about the score from the coach by way of feedback? What about, would you agree with the coach giving a score?
Yeah, no, I would say, listen, you can do it whatever way you want, but I would say is sometimes you will get players being overly critical on themselves and giving themselves a really low score where it's not the reality. Sometimes they'll give themselves a really high score, and it's not the reality either. So what I would say is, as a coach, I would actually sit down with the player and maybe challenge them in a way. Do you think? Tell me why you think you're that score, and maybe using your skill, I suppose, using your communication skills to actually agree a score among yourself and the coach. And I think that's the best way around that, Tony. It's a very, very good question. There's no point in a player putting themselves in at all 2s or putting themselves in at all 10s. I think you have to sit down with the player at the time and say, listen, I think you're a wee bit high on that. I think maybe you've left yourself very little room for improvement, and agree a score between the 2 of you.
That's brilliant, Ryan. That's brilliant. Go ahead now.
Okay. So again, it's just that slide there is just, again, it's giving you a step-by-step guide of how to do it. For each of the 5 pillars, select 3 areas that are important, relevant to your game. So I'll re-emphasize that every player is different. So again, a midfielder, maybe high fielding or stamina, endurance, that's going to be very, very important to them. Getting tackles in, stuff like that. Step 2 is to give themselves a score out of 10, 10 being the best, the top senior player in Ireland in that position. Set yourself a realistic target out of 10 where you would like to be in 12 months' time, and the areas with the low scores can now become the goals which you aim to achieve. Okay, and there's the example answers that we've just talked through. Okay, if you want then as well, you can put them. I think young players are very visual. Okay, and you can put them into an Excel document. You can see the scores. I'll just maybe use my cursor if you can see that the scores are across the top. The blue line or the blue numbers here represent, I suppose, the start of the year. The red one represents what the target's going to be at the end of the year. Okay, and it's very, very visual. You can see then on the spider diagram or on the graph, the blue is where they are, and the red is where they want to be. Okay, so this is a wee bit different. This player's identified a few different things. Their first touch, their handling has been important. Their hand passing, their tackling, knowing their role, decision making, knowing the game plan, focus, confidence, pre-performance routine, their schoolwork, their time management, and their sleep. So again, that's something, if you want to go into to more detail, that you can use with the players as well. Okay, Tony, if there's any more questions or any more observations around the pillars, do you want to ask them there now before we move on to the goal setting side of things?
Hold on now to see. Well, David has asked a question here. Would you do it at the very start of the season when you don't know the players yet?
Yeah, that I think you do, but I suppose the disadvantage of that is that you don't know, you can't input into it, but you can only go by what they're telling you. So yeah, it is a bit more difficult whenever you actually don't know the players that you're going to be working with.
Very good. And the Gareth is asking, can Ryan share some of these templates? And somebody else has asked, can Ryan share these slides?
Yep.
Ryan, the presentation will be up on the Ulster GA YouTube in a few days' time. But I think a couple of coaches are asking just for the slides alone. Is that possible?
Yeah. Well, the slides, yes, I can share the slides. The other thing that I wanted to show you at the end was the PALS website. It's a microsite on the Ulster GA website, and really what PALS stand for is performance and lifestyle. So there is a section on there. It's open to everybody. It's free to use. It explains what I'm talking about. It explains how to profile players. You can download the actual forms, the blank forms. You can download the example forms there as well. And I say I'll put up the web address at the end. So it's anything I've been talking about tonight. It's there. It's on the website, and it's available. And the same with the goal setting that we're going to come to here as well.
A lot of interest here, Ryan, I must say, from coaches here. Tony, the templates available to be edited. Do you find it better in paper or on their phone on forms? So there's a lot of coaches. So we'll maybe discuss to finish up whatever.
Yeah, listen, the forms aren't complicated. You know, you can, if you want to change something, you can draw them up yourself. The ones that I have on the website are PDFs that obviously you can't change them. It's a good point about the phones. Yeah, listen, they could do it on their phone. I don't know, maybe I'm old fashioned. I like the pen and paper, and you know, if you're doing it within a group, you can make changes and you can actually see it and you can hold it and stuff like that. But as I say, it's completely up to yourselves what way you want to.
Can they be emailed to players, Ryan?
Yeah, certainly they can be emailed.
Somebody's asked a question there too. No, that's great.
Yeah. Okay, listen, we'll move on, and I suppose the goal setting leads on from the profiling. So basically, what we've done, or what we should have done, is players have identified where they're strong and the areas for improvements. Okay, so what do you do then as a player? You actually need to set goals to improve where you're currently at. Okay, why is it important? So goal setting is a skill that you can use to maximize your performance. It involves identifying what you want to accomplish and devising a plan to assist you in getting or fulfilling your ambitions. And you see on the right hand side of the slide there, it's a sat nav. So basically what we're saying is the sat nav, its function is, you know, you type in where you are and then where you want to go. And that's kind of the same with goals. You know, you have identified where you are and you set goals to get you where you want to be. Okay, somebody else said, or as a quote, you know, with goal setting, if you aim at nothing, you'll get there every time. Okay, and I think that's very relevant as well. If you aim at nothing, if your goal's nothing, you'll definitely get there. So hopefully you'll see the benefit of goal setting as we go through the slides. So setting goals help you feel more in control. They help maintain motivation. So if players can see they're improving, they're getting closer to the goals, it helps maintain motivation. It'll increase effort to push harder, can build confidence, and goals actually can help players concentrate on the important things and provide you with direction. You know, again, for players out there, there's so much thrown at them now. There's so much noise out there around, you know, performing and around playing and S&C and different teams and all that. And I think having really defined goals written down actually helps them focus. You know, it kind of drowns out all that noise or all those other distractions and helps them concentrate on the important things, you know, and making improvements. Right. Now, what I'm saying here might be unpopular here, but if you Google goal setting in sport, what you will normally get is the SMART principle. Okay, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but really the idea behind the SMART principle is your goals should be all these things that spell the word SMART. So they should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be achievable, realistic, and they should be timely. Okay. Again, for Gaelic footballers and hurlers, I don't think it's overly useful. I think it's more useful for, say, the like of somebody who's competing in an individual sport. So the like of a swimmer or a runner, who only compete, say, for example, every 3 months or something like that. In between every time they compete, they've got maybe a block of training for, say, for example, 12 weeks. And it's really, it gives them good time to set a goal to knock maybe whatever 0.2 of a second off your time or whatever that is. So it can be a valuable tool to use for individual sport. I'll show you an example of how it can be used in Gaelic football or hurling as well. It's just, for me, it's not probably the best one to use. Again, this is available on the PALS website. You can actually see on the top of this, on the top of this slide to the top right, you can see that the web address is ulsterga.ie/PALS. It's just an example of a player setting a goal using the SMART principle. All right, so it's divided into, I suppose, 4 sections. The first one is that the player needs to write down their goal and why it's important to them. So this player, they've been really, really specific here, and I suppose you have to be specific, and that's why really I don't like the SMART principle as much. This player's written down to improve my shooting as it is currently weak, with approximately only 50% of my shots going over the bar. Okay, so that nails all those things. It's specific, it's measurable, it's all those things. Okay, I'm not sure how relevant it is. Next, after that, there's a plan of action. There's 3 steps to improve that goal or to make that goal. So the first thing this player has identified is they're going to ask advice from their coach as to how they can improve their kicking technique. Number 2, they're going to practice shooting in competitive practice situations 3 times a week with the aim of improving by 10%. And number 3, I'll practice my shooting after conditioning work so that I can maintain my focus even when I'm tired. So again, it's very, very detailed, but I'm not sure if any player is going to sit down and actually do something as detailed as that. Maybe they will. Excuse me. Maybe they won't. I think it's important, if you are using this, the SMART principle, is to obviously realize that there's going to be obstacles. You've set your goal, you've got your plan of action. You are going to experience obstacles. So this player has said that their possible obstacles will be not getting to practice in competitive situations 3 days a week due to the lack of facilities, or they're busy studying. And again, then once they've identified the possible obstacles, they've identified possible solutions as well. So they've said that they'll use the time that they do have to practice with focus and intent, making it as competitive as possible. They also said that watch past videos of themselves where they shot well and they focus on the positives. So again, that's on our website there as well. If you want, if it suits, or if you think it'll work for your players or it'll work for you, by all means, go ahead and do that. The reality, I suppose, for me is, for Gaelic footballers, hurlers, people playing team sport, it's slightly different. The way it works for us is that it's like a circle, really. You play the game, you compete, you play your game, then you review your performance, whether that be a manager reviewing the performance of the overall team or a player actually reviewing their performance. And then you work out what you've done well, you work out what you need to improve on, you try to put that in place in training or in practice, and then you go and play the game again. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If there's any questions on that, I'll be happy to take them if you want to throw the questions in there now. But again, I'm just trying to keep this as simple as possible. That's the reality for me for any team sport. You play the game, you've probably set goals for that. You review the performance. So what went well, what didn't go well, and then in training, what do we need to work on, and what are our goals going to be in the next game. So again, it's just like a cycle. Somebody, Tony, put in a question there. I didn't quite catch it.
Do this, Ryan. Can I go back to the pillars of performance here a wee second, if you don't mind?
Yes, yes.
Joe was asked the question here: Can them templates be edited? Can they be edited?
No, they're PDFs, Tony. They can't be edited. But what I would say is, it's just basically putting a few columns. If you want to edit it, it's just putting a few columns on using Microsoft Word or Excel or something like that to make the changes that you need.
That's great. That's great. We see. Hold on. There's maybe a question here. Any advice on how to marry individual players' goals with the overall team goals if a difference emerges, and even the management goals?
Yeah, I'm going to come to that now. I'm just going to show it. And again, the example here, Tony, would be to you can actually use this template for whatever you want. You can use it as a coach for an actual overall team goal setting session for a game, or an individual player can also use it if they so wish, to do it individually. So
sorry, hold on again. Sorry, there's somebody unmuted themselves there, please. Somebody has unmuted themselves. Could they mute themselves there, please? Hold on, Ryan, wee second. I might. Give me a wee second there. That's it now. I've muted everybody except ourselves. Okay, Ryan, just one more question, hopefully, before you go on here. Should parents be involved in setting goals with their child? You're muted, Ryan. Oh, sorry, Ryan. Hold on. I might have to unmute you. Sorry about this, coaches. Hold on.
Can you hear me now, Tony?
That's you now, Ryan.
Okay. I think you'd asked, can parents be involved? Of course, parents can be involved in that, and probably at younger ages they probably should be. It just depends on the situation. Sometimes coaches will have every base covered. Sometimes coaches don't have the time to cover the like of this, and a parent might think it's a good idea for them to step in and go through that with their son or their daughter. I suppose the danger of that would be sometimes a parent and a coach can see it very, very differently as to what's important or what the goals are. So I think it's important that the goals that the parents would be helping their child set would marry up with what the coach would be thinking as well, and wouldn't be kind of going against each other.
That's great. That's all the questions at the moment, Ryan.
Yeah. Okay, guys. I suppose just to show you this template, how it works, and again, probably it could be quite small. I'll read through it, but how it works. The first section there is the individual goals for a game. So this is again, as I said, it can be done for a team as a group, or it can be done for an individual. This player here has set aside before the game, they've got 3 individual goals for the game. The first one is to get more touches of the ball earlier in the match. So to say they didn't touch the ball for 8 minutes in the last match. The positioning, they set a goal to get into defensive position early and avoid the opposition breaking down the middle and be in position to press the ball or to tackle the ball. And discipline, don't react to a poor call by the referee or a mistake made by teammates. So that's the goals, the individual goals this player has set for the match. Okay, if you notice they're quite specific, and I think you should be quite specific when you're setting a goal. Okay, not just a couple of words like get 2 points or get a block or something like that. Just be specific. Really think about what it is that you're trying to do. So that's actually basically it. That's how it works. You set your 3 goals for the game, and then you go out and play the game. And then after the game, at some point, maybe that evening or the next day or the next couple of days, you come back to your document and you ask yourself, firstly, here in the top right, did I achieve my goal? Yes or no? So this player has said they achieved all their goals. And then they've reflected then. What did I do well? And again, just as I'm talking here, try to visualize this in a team setting as well. Okay, so what did we do as a group well, or what individually did I do well? So I stayed disciplined in the tackle when my opponent took me on, made myself available for the outlet pass when we turned the opposition over, and I won 3 break balls, something I haven't been doing well recently. So that's them identifying. They're reviewing the game, what I did well. Over to the right here, they've also identified, what can I do better? Okay, so they've had to think. They could communicate with teammates when they're under pressure. They can improve their shooting. They'd kick 2 wides in that game, and they can increase. Increase my ability to perform repeated sprints. I struggled to support the attack in the last 5 minutes. So again, then your goals start to come in here again. And I remember the cycle that I talked about in the previous slide. So they've set a few goals for training. So with they've 2 goals here, they're going to practice 20 shots from realistic positions after the session, and they're going to attack fitness work with 100% effort to improve my ability to perform repeated sprints in games. Okay, so I'll just to go back to the previous slide, just to remember, I think it's my opinion anyway, in team sports, this is how goal setting works. So you'll start here, you'll set your goals for the game, you play the game, you review your performance, you'll set some goals then based on what happened or what you need to improve on in training, and then the cycle starts again. And that's, for me, in team sports, how goal setting works. Okay, so again, as I say, there's goals before the match at the top here. There's a review of the match. You have your training goals in there as well. And I think when you're reviewing the game, it's important to give yourself a score out of 10 as well, or give the team a score out of 10. Your overall performance, your mental attitude, your preparation for the game, and your recovery. Okay. Any questions on that, Tony?
Just looking here, Ryan. No, there's one here. Maybe it goes back to the last one we see. As well as self-profiling, should we also conduct actual skills testing and fitness testing in order to build an objective profile?
Yeah, definitely. If you have time to do that, you're probably getting up to the age level, and I don't know what, I'm not sure which age level. I wouldn't want to put an age on it, but definitely skills testing and fitness testing it's just evidence, to build up. I think a lot of coaching now is coming back to the one-to-one with players, and actually, having that conversation with them and things that they need to improve on. And quite often, if you're going in to speak to a player, maybe their fitness is off a bit, or maybe they're not performing in certain areas, it can be very hard to have that conversation if you're not loaded with actual evidence. So I think it is a good idea, if you have time, that you can fitness test your players and show them the actual evidence, that you can skills test them and show them that maybe your left side or your right side or whatever it is you're kicking well off. You need to improve on that, and you're loaded with the evidence then. So yes, I would recommend that if you have time, but it's probably up the age grades a bit.
Right, Ryan. That's all the questions at the moment.
Okay, so that, I suppose, that really brings us towards the end. As I say, I'll invite a few more questions, or if you want to get typing there, go ahead. Hopefully at the end of this session, you understand now how to profile your strengths and weaknesses as a player. You'll be able to identify that areas that need extra attention. You'll understand the importance of goal setting, and hopefully now you understand how to set goals to improve performance. So by all means, go ahead, guys, and start to fire in the questions there.
Eugene has put up some. It's a link till but then it's a link for. I'm just looking here. Eugene has put up a link that should, but then somebody else has said it doesn't. The spreadsheet. Somebody said it doesn't open properly. Could Owen or somebody unmute themselves, or Eugene unmute themselves and come in there next?
I think that was me. I think I have it corrected now. I think I have it sorted now, Tony. Sorry.
Okay, Eugene. Thank you, Owen. Eugene, were you going to say something there?
No, just I think they've allowed editing there, so people should be able to access it.
That's great, Eugene. Owen says he's 100% there. We see anything else. We see that somebody here said, Enda says, hey, we're in the process of giving feedback to each player on how they performed last year in similar aspects to what you have showed. Any tips to marry our feedback with the player individual profiling? Have you got that question?
Just go with that again there, Tony.
We are in the process of giving feedback to each player on how they performed last year in similar aspects to what you have showed. Any tips to marry our feedback with player individual profiling?
Yeah. I suppose, see the individual stuff. I think the skill in it is, I suppose, the communication. You know, how you get on with the player. Quite often, I think when you talk to a player, you're giving player a bit of feedback. It's very, very important before you go that you give them a chance to talk. And quite often, I find anyway that the player will actually probably come up with their weaker areas, maybe you know, without you having actually said to them. They'll probably identify those things themselves. So I would let the player talk first, rather, you know, this thing about telling, you know, as a coach, if you're all the time telling, I don't think players respond to that very well. I think it's important that it's a two-way thing, that you invite the player to ask them their opinion first, and that you come to some kind of an agreement and get your point across. The other thing as well is, it's just, the more evidence that you have, the better. You know, like if you can marry some of the stuff, I don't know if you video your games, I know that's a lot of work, but you know, if you can show a player something that's visual, show them actually doing something well on a video, or something that you wanted them to improve on in a video, that can work very well, because there's nothing better than actually, you know, seeing it. So that's what I would say. Load yourself with as much evidence as possible, and if you're trying to get your point across to them and they disagree with you, you know, there's no argument really there. You know, you have the evidence there.
Just, there's a few more questions coming on here, Ryan. And as I say, any of the coaches want to unmute themselves at any stage and ask Ryan the question. There's no problem. Another one here, Kieran. How much time should you put into profiling and goal setting? How much time should you spend at it? He's asking.
It's very much up to yourselves. You know, I think sometimes teams, that your time with them is very limited. So you might think that getting them out onto the pitch and using your time that way can be important. I suppose really the title, I suppose the area that we're covering is that whole area of performance. You know, so I think at the higher levels now, that a lot of the stuff is done with the one-to-ones. People find that very, very beneficial, that they're able to sit down and have a bit of time with the players and actually, you know, go through what you expect of them, or what you want them to improve on a one-to-one basis, and listen to them as well, to see where they're at, you know, and what their thoughts are. So maybe I'm not really answering the question. It's completely up to yourselves, but I do find a serious amount of benefit of doing the one-to-one, rather than just speaking to somebody, calling them aside for 2 minutes on the training field when they're in the middle of training. It's very, very hard to absorb any information then, you know. So setting aside maybe some of those 10-minute blocks, say you have 25 players, if you can set aside 10 minutes, you know, over a Saturday or over this 3 or 4 nights, and set that aside, and you know, I think there's a lot of benefit in it.
Well, Ollie, you're sort of answering Ollie's question here too. He was talking about the one-to-ones, but how often, he says, would you expect to have one-to-ones with players throughout the year? I'm sure that's the same thing again, about having the time, Ryan.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think obviously it's beneficial at the start, and I think you know, speaking to coaches, the feedback to me sometimes is that they get really good buy-in from players when they have a one-to-one with them, particularly at the start of the year, because it just shows that you you care. It shows that you're trying to get to know the players, that you're trying to get your point. You're putting the effort in. And I think it's a very, very beneficial thing to do at the start of the year. And obviously, if you are setting some goals or setting some targets for 12 months or whatever it is, that it's important that you revisit those at the end of the season or at the start of the next season as well. And I suppose a thing I did want to mention as well, quite often managers, or coaches, they want to have a conversation with a player. Maybe a player's fitness is off, or maybe they're not performing or they're not doing what they're told. And it's very, very difficult to actually have that conversation or even to start that conversation with a player, and sometimes it can come across wrong or when the coach doesn't mean it to. So I think profiling them is a very, very easy way of getting your point across. You're not actually telling them. They probably end up telling you that their weak areas, and it just gives you an opportunity to speak to the player and maybe give your opinion on a certain area of their game that they could improve on, rather than just to say pulling them across one night of training and just diving in at the deep end.
Last couple here, Paul. Would the expectation be for the coach to review players' performance with the player, or is it for players to complete like toughly themselves? Does the coach review it with the players? Yes.
Yeah, I suppose, Tony, that can get very time consuming, and it just depends,
right,
how many in your coaching team that you have that would be available to do the like of it. I think it's probably realistic to think that after every game that you would profile the team's performance as an overall team. I don't think that it's realistic that you would do that after every game for 15, 20 plus players. I just don't think that's realistic, So, but I would say after every game that you should be reviewing it, that you should be giving the players some feedback. And again, it probably just goes back, if I move it just to the slide, down here in your training goals, it's very, very important that you review what went well, what you can do better, and then actually set goals in your training to actually improve those things or get those things right for the next game coming up.
Eugene is advising his coaches there to make sure you download the template before you start using it. Mark, for an under-17 team, would you have monthly goals or goals from game to game or season goals or season goals, or all of the above?
Yeah, I would say all of the above. I suppose the funny thing with goal setting is, and you mentioned it in the question there about season-long goals, those can change very, very quickly. You could have a goal at the start of the year and it could be very realistic to win the championship or win the league or whatever competition it is. All of a sudden, just an off day or something like that, you get beat. Those goals change very, very quickly. So I suppose that was my point with the smart goals versus the other way that I showed you. The goals can change on a week to week, game to game basis. So I would say the ones that you would really be emphasizing would be the week to week goals.
Brilliant. And the last question here, Ryan, from Paul here. How long? Thanks, lads. Just wondering Ryan's thoughts on a manager who said he prefers to do informal feedback in a casual way as opposed to written goals.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. I just think, I think sometimes the more casual, the better. Sometimes, because you get players relaxed. I think that's your skill as a coach, your communication with them. Because sometimes I think when you're working with a young player and you go to tell him something, you can see him tense up. You can see him, rightly he's nodding at you, but he's not really listening to what you're saying. So I think it's about knowing your players. The best coaches out there probably keep it as light as possible or try to make a bit of crack out of it or whatever when they're given maybe a wee bit of harsh feedback. So again, I suppose there's no best way. There's no written down best way of doing it. It's just, again, I would try a few different ways. Your own players, and as the season progresses, you'll know what works best.
A lot of coaches complimenting you here, Ryan, saying a great session. Another final question from David here. Is there player profile templates available? As I'm over a new team, would you advise to use them? Is there player profiles templates available? As I'm over a new team, or would you advise me to use them?
Yeah, well, I'm just assuming the templates that I'd shown you in the presentation there, they are available on the Ulster GAA website. I suppose just on the slide we have up at the minute, how to access them, it's a www.ulster.gaa.ie/PALS, which stands for Performance and Lifestyle. If you haven't been on the website, guys, I would recommend that you go on it. There's 3 different sections with a lot of good information. The first one's the performance area, and it contains the profiling, it contains the goal setting, it also contains some other stuff around concentration, match preparation, recovering from matches. The lifestyle section contains a lot of good information around sleep patterns, time management, and nutrition and hydration. And then there's also a player welfare section as well, which contains some information around the injury prevention, warm-up, and concussion as well, which is quite a important topic to try to educate yourself on if you are a coach, because hopefully it doesn't happen too much, but it's very, very important that if a player does get a suspected concussion during a training session or a game, that you remove them off the field and you get them to the right medical people and they get the right advice. So as I say, I'll not really talk too much about the website, but I would say it's very, very accessible there. There's downloads on it. The forms that I've shown you tonight are there. So if you do get a chance, have a look through it, and by all means have a go with it with your players. And again, I would say to anybody in the call there, if you have any further questions or you've tried this and you have a question for me, by all means just go ahead and fire me off an email and get in contact, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
No, that's it, Ryan. I think we'll call it a day. Again, all the coaches thanking you so much for a great session, and it was relevant at this time of the year to run a session like that there. So great feedback here. So Ryan, thank you so much. We didn't expect anything else other than a great session from yourself. So brilliant job. So coaches, thank you for joining tonight. As I said to you at the start of the session, we'll be running with more webinars for the next 4 Wednesday nights. You can register on the Ulster GAA website, and the link will be sent to you prior to our next session next Wednesday night. Great turnout tonight, massive turnout of coaches tonight. Thank you so much, and good luck in your coaching in this year and the years ahead. And thank you, Ryan.
Thanks guys. Thanks, Tony.